Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and what I want to talk about today is not just Express but alternatives Express. So the goal in this video is to show you 4 micro web frameworks in Node. Okay, so this is in the Node world. There's lots of web frameworks in Node, but these are generally like the 4 smallest building blocks. Okay, so oftentimes when you're using other frameworks like, let's say, Nest, Foal, etc., oftentimes they're built on top of Express, Koa, Fastify, and Polka, which are the 4 frameworks I'm going to talk about today. So the goal is, first I'm going to show you Express again. So for those of you who are not familiar with Express and Node, we'll go over that one. Then we'll also do Fastify, Polka, etc. So we'll just create one for each. So I'm going to create a new project because I'll just do all 4 in the same project because it's just to demonstrate. So we'll say frameworks. Okay, I'm going to open up that folder in my terminal. Create a new node project, npm init-y, and we're just gonna do like a hello world in each one, just so you can see like how simple the code is in each one to just do a basic, hey, here's my server listener, and here is my hello world route, So let's do that. So first I want to install Express, npm install Express. Express is by far the most popular and most well known of the 4. Okay, and let me just open this up, create a new file. We'll call this one express.js. Okay, and basically the way Express works is just like any library, you're going to import it. So const express equals require express. And essentially the minimum you need to do is you need to create an app object. That's like the minimum you need to do. Const app equals express, and then with that app object we can create at least one route. Okay, create a route. So we're going to say, hey, app.get this is to our main page. We actually just make this a catch-all route that'll catch all requests. And actually I don't even care if it's a get, post, put, or request. I'll do an app.all, so literally every request will get hit by this route. And this takes in a request and response object, so they are separated, not all combined, as you'll see in another framework. Res. So all the request data is in this object, and then all the helper functions for sending a response are in this object, and also properties of the response are in that object. And all I have to do is I can do res, meaning response dot send hello world, and send the text response. But the thing is, I got to make sure the listener, the server is listening. So do app.listen. This gets the server listening on port 3000. You always kind of want to do it at the bottom because you want the rest of your application read into the computer's memory before the server starts listening. And then you're able to pass a callback saying whatever you want, console.log, server listening on port 3000. That's it. This is your minimal Express program. Doesn't get any more simple than that. So if I do this node express.js, okay, server's listening on port 3000. I head over to localhost 3000 because again, localhost is your computer. Hello world. Cool. Okay, so that's Express. The next one we're going to talk about is Koa. Koa is actually made by the same people who made Express. Okay, made by the same people. Okay, actually I don't want that. I want to go to the main Koa website, Koa JS. There we go. It's made by the same people who made Express. The idea was Express is pretty minimalist. Like it doesn't really. It's just like a very light abstraction over the Node HTTP library, and that was the reason why it was created. Because like in the early days of Node had bugs. Certain things were inconsistent. So Express tried to fix all those things and ignore the sirens in the background. I do live in Brooklyn where there's constant sirens, especially since I live not too far from a hospital. Now, so they went backwards, and new features were introduced to JavaScript and things like that. And they're like, there's certain things we maybe would have done differently had we gone back, and they created Koa. So Koa is just like an even more lightweight alternative. Like in the sense where like Express really didn't give you too much. Like if you've used Express before, you know you have to bring in a lot of stuff via third parties if you want to do sessions, if you want to do JWT tokens, if you want to connect to a database, everything has to be brought in through like a third party library. But you do have a built-in router. You don't have to like go import a router library to use an Express. In Koa, you do. There is no built-in router. It's really just a very even lighter abstraction over the Node HTTP library, but it is built sort of to factor in sort of like a lot of the newer asynchronous features in JavaScript, and I think it is supposed to be like a little bit faster, maybe a lot faster. I don't know. Fastify, I think, is going to be sort of like the one that got the reputation for being sort of super fast. So let's install Koa. npm install Koa. Okay, so we install Koa. Now let's create another file. And this is koa.js. Okay, and let's just do the basic stuff. Const Koa. And I always forget exactly what are the steps here. Express I use like every day. Koa. And these are the ones I don't use quite as often. So let's take a look at the basic syntax here. Okay, so there we go. So we're gonna, I'll just copy this right over and we'll walk through it. Okay. So basically we bring in Koa. So we would bring in, create an application object. So this looks exactly like Express. Okay. Now the difference is there is no like app.get, app.all. There is none of those like router functions built into Koa. There's just, and then the request and response object are all wrapped up in one parameter. So you have this instead, you have this instead of rec and res like we had in Express, you just have one object called context, which has rec and res inside of it. The request and response object are actually things generated by Node, so they do always exist. It's just like how does a particular framework decide to handle that is different. So in this case, they decide to bundle it into one big object. And then see here, instead of sending a response, you just say, hey, this is what the body equals. Okay. So in this case, I'm saying, hey, the body, the context body equals hello world. So, and then when this function is done, whatever the body is, that's assumed to be the response. Okay. And context, you'd have to go through the documentation, but has all the requests and header properties. Like if we go through, I think there's a list somewhere where we can go through everything. And here we go, context. Okay, so you see here's like the request object. It's actually in there's like context.rec. There's a response object, but you don't have necessarily all those response functions because those were added by Express. Like, response.redirect, response.json, response.render. You just have sort of the core Node response functions, which are these right here. So again, it's just giving you sort of the basic setup. Okay. And then you could bring in a router library. There's like different Koa router libraries. Just like Express, you bring in all the other pieces separately. Okay. But let's just run this program. So I'll just do node koa.js. Oh, I didn't put like a message or anything. I forget. Can I pass the listener here a callback? I think I can. Backlog, listener. Yep, I can. Okay. Console.log. I just like to always do that because I like having that little message. There we go. Now let's go back to here. I refresh. Same thing. Okay. So not too much different. Okay. Again, this was just meant to be sort of like an even simpler version of Express. Okay. And pretty much anything you can do with Express, you can do here. There isn't as many libraries that are like you can use pretty much anything you could use with Express here. It just might not be as obvious because like their Express is just hugely popular. So a lot of those libraries have documentation how to work with Express. They have versions of their libraries that are built specifically to just kind of like tailor fit with Express. While with Koa, there's a decent amount of third-party stuff, but not near as much as Express. So Express is always going to be sort of like your easiest place to go find all the things you need. But things like Koa, Fastify do offer you a little bit more speed, and so does Polka. Okay, let's actually do Polka real quick. So npm install Polka. You can see like all of these pretty much work the same way. At the core, like the node HTTP library is what's doing the majority of the work. These libraries are just offering you some tools to work with it a little bit easier. Usually giving you some helpful like response functions or helping, you know, curate the request and response object. But let's go look up Polka JS. Polka JS, and the API is almost exactly like Express if I remember correctly. Okay. So we already installed Polka. Okay. Just, been a while, so let me just take a quick look here. Got it. Okay, yeah, so the API is pretty much just like Express. Like that snippet they have right there in the documentation is probably a little bit more verbose than it should be, but here we go, new file, polka.js. You bring in Polka equals require Polka. Hey, did I not just install Polka? Usually I would try like to correct me. So yeah, no, I did. Okay, cool. Just making sure. Polka. Okay. Then we create our app object. Const app equals Polka. And let me just take a look over here. And yeah, the routes work pretty much the same. Except we're using res.end. It doesn't give you helper functions. Res.end comes with Node HTTP library. So it would be app.get. Again, I'll just do a wildcard so that it's all routes. Rec res. Let me just double confirm. I think that's the signature here. Yep. Rec res. That's for like middleware function if it's using next. Cool. Yeah, rec res. Oh, that's photos. Rec res. And then we'll just say res.end. Hello world. Okay, and then we just make the app listen on port 3000. Okay, and see this one doesn't have a callback port number as an option. Okie dokie. They really, because they're just probably using the, for the most part, the core HTTP listener in JavaScript. Again, Polka is supposed to be very lightweight, so it's not giving you much, but the idea is that it's fast. And it's like basically the core HTTP library with just enough vanilla to feel it, make it feel a little bit more like Express. So let's do that. Node polka.js. I get no message, but let's just confirm that it's working. So I go back over here, I hit refresh, and yeah, still get hello world. And just to confirm that if I turn off the server, it's not working. See, I get that if the server's off, so it's working. But you see, it's the same pattern. We've noticed the same pattern in all of this, where you create this application object, which, if you've ever used the HTTP library, it becomes apparent that what's going on under the hood is that this app is really this giant function or this giant object that has functions built into it. Because the way the HTTP library works is you start the listener and you pass the HTTP library a function that it passes every request into. And then that big function will return a response. Okay? So the idea is your entire application is really just one function, which is really what all applications are at the end of the day. It's just one function where you put in all your logic for how the request gets handled. Okay? But instead of you having to like design all that and create a lot, like I've done it's a bit more work. This kind of helps give you sort of a more accessible API for like saying, okay, this is how I want requests to be handled. This is the order that I want things to happen in, without you having to write this big giant function where you're writing lots of if statements of this thing, then having to stream in the body and all this stuff. This handles all that for you, which is actually really nice because setting it up manually is not fun. Okay, one more, and that's Fastify. So let's install Fastify. npm install Fastify. And you can see, like, you know, you can easily pick up all 4 of these and be able to say, hey, I know 4 frameworks without a horrendous amount of effort. Because, again, they're all kind of coming from the same place. The Node HTTP library. So they're all going to generally have a similar design. Fastify JS. I think Fastify has a slightly different one. Let's go back. But again, Fast and also a minimalist, very simple framework. We already installed Fastify. Here I will copy sort of like the, let me just read this over real quick. Fastify. Where are the framework? Well, I'll make this a little bit more straightforward. You'll see it ends up being the same thing. Fastify like that. Here they're just trying to do it. Here they're just doing that whole like express and then you invoke the function all in one line. That's essentially what they're doing there. I will break it up into multiple lines so that way it's a little bit easier to read. No, I don't want to print stuff. Then let's just read the rest of this. Run the server. Try, Fastify, listen. Okay, so here they're just creating a function for saying the list. Yeah, again, a little bit more verbose than it really needs to be. Okay. No, but I see how we can use this. Okay. So let's create another file. We'll call it fastify.js. And this one, we're going to require Fastify. I'm going to keep it straightforward so that way you see the consistencies. Require Fastify. Okay. Then I can create my app object. Const app equals Fastify. Okay, then I write a listener. App.get. Let me just double check that the syntax of that. Okay, fastify.get. We're writing using async functions. Okay, and they say request reply, but it just means rec-res. And the response is whatever the function returns. Okay, so in this case, we're not using res.end. We're not using res.json. You are just returning a value. So again, let's just kind of go through how we did it in the last few. So see in Express, we use a function like built-in Express functions like res.send, res.json. In Koa, we had to assign the value to the context body. That's how the response got determined. In Polka, we just use res.end, which is actually built into Node, meaning you just send it really means end the request. Like you're done processing the request. Ship this inside the body. And then Fastify, what you're doing is you're just putting a return value. So app.get. Okay, we'll put, again, I'll make this a catch-all route. Asterisk means just anything at the end of the URL. Rec-res, same story. Okay, so I'm just going to use the same arguments. I always like to stick to similar names to keep the abstraction as little, or the differences in abstraction as little as possible. But in this case, what I'm going to do instead is return the string hello world. So that's how I determine the response. Okay, so I've just read, and then this has to be an async function is the other key part for Fastify. Okay. Okie dokie, and then we can start the server listener. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to define this in a function, so that way we can do the thing. So const, let me think about that. Const listen equals okay, and then we're just going to basically write a normal async function to kickstart a server. So again, this is a little extra steps than the other ones, but I can see this would give you a little bit more flexibility, which I like, because here's what I can do with this. I can sit there and say, here we're putting a try catch block to handle errors, which is nice. But I just be like, await app.listen on port 3000, but then I can put my message right after that, console.log, and because it's async, it'll wait for this to finish first. And if there's errors, the catch block will catch it. So this console log will only show up if this is successful. Okay, listening on port 3000, and then I do the catch block in case there's any errors. Error console.log error. Okay, then I just hit save. So Prettier can fix that up a little bit for me. And then I can use this function that I just defined, listen. Okay, so now if I run this, it should work. Node fastify.js, listening on port 3000. Now if I go over here, refresh, and I get hello world again. Okay, so you see, like, it's not horrendously different. again, I'm still just oftentimes importing the library, creating my application object, okay, which really kind of handles a lot of the HTTP abstraction. It's creating the HTTP object with the HTTP library, also managing how the function that gets passed to it runs, and it abstracts a lot of that, which is nice. It's not like a huge amount of abstraction, but enough that it takes a lot of work, a lot of really like repetitious work. And then here, and once it's always we're always kind of specifying the verb and stuff. It's again you're seeing the same process. Again, in Fastify, the return value is the response. In Express, we use functions like res.send and res.json. In Koa, we assign the value to the context body unless we use some sort of third-party router. And in Polka, we just use res.end, which is just what's built into Node. But bottom line is all of these are micro frameworks or minimalist web frameworks built in Node that do the job. And then they're actually very good platforms for you to build your own framework on. Okay, like recently I made this template called Merced Express, which is basically a template in Express, but also I built a little CLI or scripts on top of it so you can quickly generate Mongo models and generate controllers, kind of give it like a little bit of a Rails-like experience. But Express is at the core in the same way. Like if you do look at Ruby on Rails, I think it's like a rack that's at the core. So generally, like at the end of the day, no one builds everything from point A to point Z from scratch. You have these smaller pieces, and those are used to build sort of the bigger, more robust things. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Hopefully this was a nice tour of some Node minimalist frameworks. Have a great day and enjoy.